What's up, y'all? Today we're going to do something very interesting, and something I've been waiting to do for a long time, which is delve into the world of Aegis, the first mission. This is technically the first piece of media in the Persona 3 timeline, which covers the events surrounding Aegis' life during her first tenure of operation, over 10 years before the start of Persona 3. For those who don't know, this was a game previously only available for one in Japan, and also only on feature mobile phones. Not only that, but this is considered pretty much lost media until very recently. The original version of the game is actually still lost media, as the version available now is a one-to-one recreation of the game in Unity. The only difference between the two is that the enemy projectiles act a little bit differently and the music is remastered. The game is obviously not available on modern phones and also not available for download, even if you happen to have a compatible phone from the mid-2000s. BBMF, which is the company that originally developed this game, and many other Atlas phone games that are now considered lost media, has not existed for a very long time. This game has only really been digestible in any way because some guy on a Japanese video sharing website happened to have footage of his entire playthrough. If it weren't for him, this would truly be lost media. Fortunately, the publisher Gmode announced a few months ago that they got their hands on the game and will be bringing it to Steam as of the time I am writing this. So yes, literally seconds after writing this intro, I will be playing and recording my playthrough of Aegis the First Mission on its launch day in the West. For those interested in playing the game for yourselves, I will leave a link to the Steam page in the description. Be warned though, as I had to pay $20 for this Japanese cell phone game from 2008. Unfortunately, the game is not in English, and a fan translation patch is probably coming soon, but not available as of the time of recording. The game is only a few hours long, and the script is about 90 pages long, so it really isn't too bad. With that being said, let's get right into the game. Now, I assume most people watching this would be most interested in the story, but I gotta cover my bases about the game itself. This is the first not turn-based game I think I've ever even mentioned on this channel, with it being a top-down action RPG. It's hard for me to be too critical as I don't have a point of reference to compare this to other mobile phone games from the time, but it's definitely no masterpiece gameplay-wise. It's definitely not bad per se, but it has its fair share of redundancy and odd game design choices. So I won't get too deep into it as I didn't really delve into the weapons and armor available to purchase because the translation script doesn't really cover the details of the shop. What I could see was the fact that there are different classes and types of weapons and armor. For example, there are regular guns as well as finger guns that Aegis typically uses. Controls are pretty straightforward. You can fire your weapon, jump, double jump, or summon Palladian for an attack. Speaking of, some enemies cannot be damaged by melee attacks, so using a persona is required. The same shadows found in Persona 3 are the enemies in this game, so just like those, they are prone to giving you status effects like poison or stun. This is all explained in the tutorial section where the game actually does a pretty good job of giving you the grasp of things without being too monotonous. My biggest issue with the combat is the difficulty and especially the scaling. The prior is easier to forgive as I could understand the idea of not making a game played on a tiny mobile phone screen too punishing. However, the biggest issue with the game in its entirety is the really stupid level scaling. This game is essentially impossible to just blaze through and quickly finish, as you could literally not beat it underleveled. This issue is not rooted in difficulty at all, as the game will actually block you from progressing often if your level is not high enough. There's no information on the levels of the enemies, so I'll guess in order to explain what I mean. Let's say that you are 4 levels below an enemy. No matter what weapon I used, even if I used Palladian, you literally put up 0 damage. You level up once or twice, and maybe now you could start putting up single-digit attack points on enemies with hundreds to get through. Even if you upgrade your weapons or use Palladian's special attacks, it won't matter. You'll need to take no liberties when fighting enemies in the overworld so you don't get locked into a boss fight where you have no chance of winning. Aside from that deriving a lot of enjoyment out of the game, everything else is pretty good and honestly impressive for a mobile phone game. The music is limited. There are maybe about 9 tracks in the entire game, but what's there is good enough to the point where it doesn't really make you want to rip your ears out despite the fact that it's being played in multiple loops for hours on end, honestly. Yakushima is a fantastic setting. It gets pretty samey after a while, but the game does a pretty good job of balancing your missions in different areas so it doesn't get too bad. The quality of graphics, dare I say, is close to PS1 quality. I wouldn't say it looks as good as Final Fantasy VII for obvious reasons, but the assets and environments are of the same level. Certain areas like the cedar tree or the beach area are really memorable and nice looking. Aegis' low poly model is pretty goofy, sure, but honestly looks good when considering the hardware. Character portraits are pixelated, but not to the point where they look noticeably bad. And I can imagine it's hardly noticeable when playing on a platform it was actually designed for. Speaking of the characters, like in other Persona games, I would call that facet the strongest selling point of the game. I really came to like the few hours we spent with the new cast we got, and the game does a good job giving Aegis' story in the journey a compelling prequel. So without further ado, let's get into the summary of the story. In May of 1999, the story unfolds on Yakushima Island, where Yu Kimijima, a scientist working for the Kirijo group, is searching the Kirijo ergonomics facility for Aegis, who hasn't arrived as expected. Along the way, Yu encounters a young Mitsuru Kirijo, who learns about Aegis for the first time. This is literally just a fan service moment. She doesn't show up once for the rest of the entire game. Meanwhile, Aegis wakes up at Yakushima Base Center under the care of her trainer, Shota Aizawa. Initially disoriented, Aizawa fears that she's malfunctioning. When Yu, who is now overseeing Aegis' development, arrives, they clash briefly. During Aegis' first exercise, it becomes apparent that the facility is employing modified shadows in these live drills. Yu and Shota disagree over whether Aegis should emulate a robotic soldier, leading Yu to lament how Aegis is treated merely as a machine and criticizes Shota's harshness towards her. During the second day of the exercise, 2 additional researchers at the facility are introduced. Kyoka Sayama, responsible for equipment and arrangements, as well as the GOAT, Eiichiro Takaba, who actually isn't just fan service and gets a lot of much needed characterization in this title. Aegis ventures outside for a field exercise where the player experiences the overworld for the first time. Here she must collect passcodes to unlock a gate. Following this, she confronts a much stronger shadow at the mountain's peak. After the battle, as Shota and Yu meet her on her return, a stray shadow appears. Aegis faces it on a bridge which collapses, sending her plunging into a river flowing towards the sea. On the third day, Aegis wakes up on the beach and encounters a young boy named Takashi Tomari. Takashi is fascinated to discover that Aegis is a robot, and he seems to harbor a particular interest towards her, which is strongly hinted to be romantic. This is normally the type of scene that I call out as cringe anime shit, but this is Aegis we're talking about, so I could hardly blame him. Despite initially maintaining a distant attitude, Aegis finds herself intrigued by Takashi's charm and contemplates returning to the lab to explore these newfound emotions. She starts to ponder her purpose and whether or not these feelings are a malfunction or a part of her intended programming. After meeting with Kyoka Sayama, Aegis encounters more shadows while out on a mission. Kyoka is surprised by this as the exercise had been called off, and the shadows shouldn't be outside of the designated area. Concerned, Kyoka instructs Aegis to return to the lab immediately, assuming the role of her guide since Shota cannot communicate with her. Along the way, Aegis encounters Takashi again, and they share a moment where she nearly opens up about her feelings. Kyoka observes this interaction, and implies that she believes Aegis has romantic feelings for Takashi, despite Aegis being a machine supposedly incapable of such emotions. The Kirijo Group scientists then receive order to seize all exercises and prioritize the eradication of the shadows. Suddenly, Kyoka detects a significant shadow signal on the beach. Aegis is dispatched immediately to eliminate it. However, her mission is interrupted by a monkey that leads her to a young child who seems to have fallen earlier. Concerned for the child's safety, Aegis carries her back to the lab. Ichiro mentions that he also has a young child of his own. I wonder who that is.
Are you stupid?
Later, Shota confronts Yu once more, accusing her of disregarding the child and human life. Their argument is cut short by the realization that the girl is missing. Upon finding the girl, Aegis is offered a deal. If she takes some photographs of Yakushima for the girl, she'll receive a key needed for her progress. While Aegis fulfills this task, Yu shares insights into popular tour spots on Yakushima, mentioning her own childhood on the island. She highlights a tree called the Moroku Cedar, believed to possess mysterious powers. Aegis returns with the photos, which the girl appreciates but thinks that Aegis' photography skills suck, which I thought was pretty funny. Maybe this went over my head, or I could be looking into it too much, but I have no idea what this story beat was about. This girl just shows up, causes a diversion, and then fucks off for the rest of the game, never to be seen again. I don't even think she has a name, and she didn't even have a portrait, so I guess the game didn't think she was that important either. Later on a night mission at the beach, Yu begins to open up to Aegis about her past and childhood. She felt isolated and had few friends, but Aizawa provided protection and was a close companion despite of how much of an asshole he's been up until this point. And as long as she has Aegis, she'll remain content. Aegis grapples with her understanding of emotions and the concept of happiness, but Yu believes that one day, even as a machine, Aegis will grasp the true meaning of what happiness is. After completing the mission, Aegis returns to the lab. The following day, they receive direct orders from Takaharu Kirijo, Mitsuru's father and the current head of the Kirijo group. He instructs them to fight to the death and to protect the island's civilians. Takeharu warns that Aegis' loss is probable in the process, and advises them to continue development on earlier models if this occurs. This has some minor Persona 3 implications, as I'm pretty sure little to no info was given about the other robots that Ikutsuki mentions in regards to Aegis. This means that Aegis is significantly more important than the others, and presumptually the only one capable of feeling emotions. Shaken by Takaharu's directive, Yu excuses herself to gather her thoughts, but she doesn't return. The team acknowledges her emotional attachment to Aegis and the distressing prospect of losing her, and having her replaced. Shota steps up as leader in this situation and insists on following Takaharu's orders to continue fighting. Kyoka reports a significant shadow signal near the waterfall, prompting Aegis to be sent there to confront the shadows. During the next mission, Aegis encounters Takashi again. In their conversation, he confides in Aegis, sharing that he came to Yakushima to escape the stresses of life, with his main focus being on passing entrance exams and attending university. However, he admits to feeling uncertain about his place in life, and expresses a desire to remain on Yakushima. He suggests that being around Aegis helps alleviate his anxiety and apparent depression. Their conversation is interrupted by Yu, who questions Takashi's presence. Yu notices the emotional closeness between Aegis and Takashi and forbids Aegis from meeting with him in the future, signaling her to leave. However, before departing, Yu acknowledges Takashi's significance to Aegis and hints at his special power. She encourages Takashi to visit the lab and speak with her if he's interested. Maybe you could see where this is going. As the next day begins, a meeting at the lab reveals Yu's absence. Concerns rise about the shadows as they seem to be mutating and multiplying. Eiichiro explains that while shadows can consume people and transform them, most of the island's shadows are mutated from local wildlife, like monkeys and other animals. They detect that the shadows are converging towards a central point, possibly merging to form an even more powerful entity. Worried about Yu's safety, they decide to send Aegis to locate her before proceeding with the mission. Aegis finds Yu near the Moroku Cedar, where they previously met. Yu reveals that she has no intention of returning to the lab and engages Aegis in a conversation about the essence of life. Despite Yu's attempts to explain the concept of living beyond fulfilling a purpose, Aegis struggles to grasp the idea, constrained by her identity as a machine. However, Yu expresses her belief in Aegis' inherent humanity, and desires for others to recognize her in the same way. This leaves Aegis torn between her programmed role and her emerging human-like emotions. This isn't reflected in the dialogue, but you could see Yu's sprite get really close to Aegis for like 2 seconds and then back away. I'll assume that this is either a hug or a kiss. Citing business to attend to, she sends Aegis back to the lab. Aegis shares her conversation with Yu with the team, leading to the discovery that a controller is used to manipulate shadows in the exercises, and it's vanished from the lab, presumably taken by Yu before her departure. Eiichiro explains that while the controller can influence shadows, its range is limited and could only affect a few at a time, making it incapable of controlling all of the island's shadows. Fortunately, the team possesses a similar device at the training grounds, which they retrieve for further use. A significant signal is detected at the Moroku Cedar, precisely where Yu was earlier. Aegis is dispatched to investigate the area. Aegis arrives at the Moroku Cedar and notices an unusual glow emanating from its entrance. Reminiscent of the light seen at the waterfall dungeon previously, this light is suspected to be connected to the origin of the shadows. Aegis ventures inside, finding herself in a labyrinth series of caverns illuminated by bright lights and teeming with numerous enemies. The interior kind of resembles the Haraba segment of Tartarus. A stray shadow resembling one Aegis battled on the collapsed bridge earlier in the game lures her into the maze. Upon reaching the bottom of the maze, Kyoka reports a significant signal nearby, just beyond the door. Opening it reveals a vast arena-like space with stairs leading upward. Aegis hears a woman's voice from the top of the stairs and discovers it to be Yu Kimijima. Yu admits to waiting there for Aegis' arrival and reveals that she has plans for the occasion, once again refusing Aegis' suggestion to return. Confused and distressed by Yu's actions, Aegis blames herself, feeling defective in some way. However, Yu denies this and reaffirms that Aegis isn't just a machine, emphasizing that she possesses a heart and a personality. Yu explains that her main goal in leading Aegis' development was to enable her to become indistinguishable from a human. Despite Yu's efforts to clarify, Aegis still struggles to comprehend this, leading Yu to grow frustrated with her. The conversation is interrupted by Shota, who rushes into the arena and attempts to dissuade Yu from her plans. Despite Shota's pleas, Yu remains steadfast and reveals what she has been working on: the source of the large signal, a colossal shadow, which, get this, is the squirmy kid who had a crush on Aegis. This revelation throws Aegis into a moral conundrum. She must decide whether to destroy the shadow, potentially killing Takashi in accordance with her programming, or to spare it and safeguard Takashi's life, a dilemma orchestrated by Yu. Yu's apparent frustration with Aegis' struggle to accept her emotions led her to conduct this experiment, testing whether Aegis would prioritize her programming over saving Takashi. Yu refrains from attacking and ponders on why Aegis hasn't initiated combat, implying her belief that Aegis' programming will override her desire to protect Takashi. Forced to confront the shadow, Aegis engages in combat, ultimately defeating it and potentially sacrificing Takashi in the process, deeming it the greater good to protect a larger number of people. After the battle, Takashi is alive, but found on the ground unresponsive. Yu descends from the stairway to converse with Aegis and Shota. She admits that her scheme was primarily aimed at evoking emotions out of Aegis, guiding her to understand where her heart should lead her and the genuine value of human life. Yu expresses frustration with Aegis' previous inability to grasp these concepts. She isn't exactly chastising Aegis for this, it's more out of her own ability as a researcher and protector of Aegis' consciousness. This conversation is interrupted by a shadow, and before it could attack Aegis from behind, she jumps in between them and takes the hit from her. And yes, Nokia phone notwithstanding, this is a Persona 3 game, so as you would assume, the wound was mortal. As their final moments together unfold, Aegis finally comprehends her emotions and the essence of what being alive is. Aegis pledges to strive to embody the humanity that Yu had envisioned for her. In her final moments, Yu offers her last apology to Aegis, expressing her enduring connection even beyond death. With a sense of closure, Yu passes away. Despite his grief, Shota instructs Aegis to pursue the shadow responsible for Yu's death. This shadow is believed to be the leader orchestrating the remaining shadows on the island. Upon closer examination of Takashi's apparently lifeless body, Aegis concludes that he has merely fainted, though she expresses her sorrow at the sight of Yu's lifeless form. As Aegis ascends to another staircase and exits through the door, she finds herself back on the island. She notices the fleeing shadow attempting to escape the Moroku cedar. Determined, Aegis gives chase and discovers that the shadow is trying to merge with the tree itself. Aegis finds herself transported to a peculiar underground space. This shadow has fused with the tree, giving rise to a formidable winged entity resembling a tree. This is the final battle of the game, and definitely the most variety you'll see in the combat, with enemies swarming around you as the tree throws different types of attacks at Aegis. Once the battle is done, you return to the island. It is deduced that with the leader gone and the containment of the other shadows within the cedar tree, all of the shadows have been eliminated. Back at the lab, Kyoka discloses that headquarters have mandated the erasure of all of Aegis' memories in the aftermath of the incident. This decision incites anger in Shota, who now seemingly shares Yu's perspective on Aegis. Kyoka further reveals that she and Ichiro are designated to report to the Kirijo group. She invites Shota to join them. He, not surprisingly, declines from doing so. After some closing remarks from Kyoka and Ichiro, Aegis has a talk with Shota on the beach, and acknowledges the impending erasure of her memories about all the time she spent with everybody. Despite recognizing the wrongness of Yu's actions, she harbors no anger towards her. Aegis acknowledges her dual nature as both being capable of feeling emotions and as a weapon designated for duty, but expresses hope in evolving into the human that Yu envisioned. Aegis clarifies that it was her who engineered her ability to experience emotions and believes that Yu's legacy will endure as long as she exists. Their conversation takes a lighter turn as they discuss whether to swim in the sea. Sota declines, but assures Aegis that she is free to pursue whatever she desires, including speaking like a human and being called by her name. Aegis thanks Aizawa for everything, and then the game fades to black. I haven't played a lot of mobile games in general, let alone for phones designed when I was around 8 years old, but this was without a doubt a Persona 3 game, despite the gameplay shortcomings. It didn't really feel like a bullshit money grab with the Persona 3 name slapped onto it, like one would expect, but a narrative that actually has real relevance to Aegis' character and the themes of the actual Persona 3. I definitely won't tell you that the game is worth $20, but if you're a P3 show like I am, it's definitely worth your time at the very least. That's all for now. My next video will almost certainly be covering the newly released SMTVV, so for that, subscribe if you haven't and stay tuned. Until next time.